Welcome all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. Thank you for joining us for this I Am Remarkable International Women's Day Talk. And for those that don't know, I Am Remarkable is a global movement that empowers everyone to celebrate their achievement in the workplace and beyond. To date, I Am Remarkable has reached over 700,000 people across 182 countries. All right. So throughout March, we've been celebrating Women's History Month with workshops and talks, bringing together participants from all around the world to celebrate the power of diversity, inclusion, and allyship. So while empowering people from all walks of life to embrace their remarkable achievements, and we're excited to be joined by a very special guest today. So, who am I? I am Dr. Zippy, and I'm excited to be here with you today. I'm an educator, a consultant, and an executive coach. I work with leaders to help them unlock their full potential and lead with confidence. I'm also a platinum facilitator at IAmRemarkable, where I get to empower people to own their achievements and amplify their voices. I am passionate about helping individuals and teams thrive. So whether it's through leadership development, strategic coaching, or creating inclusive spaces for growth. So thanks for tuning in. I can't wait to dive into today's conversation. So please use the chat function and add any questions that you may have for Melissa. We will have a Q&A session at the end. So it's now my great pleasure to be hosting this talk with a truly remarkable individual. Melissa is an award-winning journalist, renowned for her work as a reporter and a moderator. She's a writer and a producer. So with over 20 years of experience in a career spanning some of the world's most respected newsrooms, including CNN, CBC, Melissa has told powerful stories from around the globe, giving a voice to those who need it most. So let's take a quick look at Melissa in action.
I'm Melissa Mahtani in New York, and here are the top stories on CBS News Roundup.
I am surrounded by 10 incredible individuals who are making the world a better place.
Here to help us sort fact from fiction. Good morning.
Good morning. 4 times the normal demand was seen for 15 hours straight. Hamilton came to the mainland escaping a hurricane that had devastated his island, and this is kind of what we're seeing now.
Right, he wrote a plea for support, and God, I wish that weren't so relevant right now.
This deposition today is in relation to a civil suit that is being brought by the New York Attorney General, Letitia James.
Recent posts alleging that one wealthy LA couple, Stuart and Linda Resnick, own more than half the water in California, are circulating online. The FAA hires for a wide range of jobs, but there is no evidence to show that DEI has in any way compromised air aviation safety or has anything to do with the crash.
Wow, Melissa. There she comes in. Melissa, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Wow. Could you start by sharing a few words with our audience?
Absolutely. Zippy, thank you for having me. And hello to the I Am Remarkable community. It is such a great pleasure to be with you all. I have to say that I felt very humbled and privileged when I got asked to join this community. And I felt a bit like, wow, am I remarkable? Which goes to show the importance of the work this organization does, because we should all feel proud of our accomplishments, and I clearly need to take some of their workshops. So I'm delighted to be here and joining you all.
I am so happy, Melissa, that you're here. So Melissa, we're going to go right away and get into it. Melissa, tell us, I know you've had an incredible career across major news networks like CNN, CBC, CNBC. I was like, wow. So what inspired you to pursue journalism?
Well, thank you. It wasn't actually by design. To be very honest with you, I was a teenager and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like, obviously, I think there are things that, will steer you or nudge you in one direction. But I was watching movies and kind of trying things on. And I remember watching the movie called Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow. It's a really old movie. I don't know if some people will remember it. But she worked in PR and it seemed like she had a really glamorous and fun job, and she would organize parties and she got loads of freebies. And I was like, that looks great. I think maybe I'm going to try PR. And so I started doing some work experience internships. And as I did them, I remember becoming very irritated with the way that they operated. And, there are some people who are born to have careers in PR, and I really respect them. But for me personally, I didn't like that a big business owner would dictate what I should be doing, or like spending so much money into specific messaging, or spending so much money when other things were happening in the world. And I just found that it wasn't the right space for me. And so I worked in this one company where they had a branded content section, but they also had a fact-based content section. And I felt myself being pulled towards that side, because what really got me going or inspired me was that something big in the world would happen and you'd have to rip everything up and just react. And I very much like that the world became my boss. So, I mean, of course you work for a corporation, but you don't know what's going to happen. And that's how I first got the journalism bug. And, and then I started working for news agencies. So like an AP or a Reuters, where again, something big would happen in the world and you would rush to go out to that place and to get visuals of it, and to be able to tell the rest of the world what was going on. And it felt urgent, and it felt important, and it felt very, very necessary. And that was my entry into journalism. And then I got hooked and started working as a field producer, show producer, and then the rest came.
I love it. What a story.
I should say something very polished and be like, yes, I always wanted to go into journalism since the day I was born. But that's the truth, So yeah. I do think you have these things inside you that will nudge you in the right direction. But it's not always that clear cut. And for people who do know what they want to do and do think that it's very clear cut, like you wake up from day one and you're like, I'm going to be a doctor. Kudos to you. The rest of us are just trying to figure it out.
I know. I really, for sure. Even for me, my career has not been linear. And when I do work with people, I'm like, there's nothing that is a straight line. So I love that this is where it's brought you, and it's brought you right to our stage today. So tell us a little bit about some of the barriers you faced, Melissa, as a woman in this industry.
Well, I'm smiling first because I feel like barriers faced, it sounds like it's past tense, but it's like every day, we face barriers. I was told I was too young initially. Then I'm getting to the stage where I'm like, am I too old? I was, had a British accent. I wasn't American enough. I was too weak. I wouldn't be able to carry equipment. There's always something. And that's just the world. And I mean, it's not just about being a woman. I think there's so many other barriers that we face. I've also been on the receiving end of not just racism, but reverse racism. In a sense, I remember on one of my shoots, I was traveling with my senior producer in the Middle East, and they thought that I was Arab because of how I look. And therefore they kind of made me go through a separate security than my senior producer. And so he was a white man and he sailed through. And then I had to go through all these other sort of obstacles, which was crazy to me, because I was like, you should be uplifting your own and not trying to discriminate against me because you think I'm this person, even though I'm not.
Yeah.
And then those are the external barriers that we face. I think equally as women, we face so many internal barriers, that imposter syndrome, that I'm not good enough, the voices in your head that are saying, can you really do this? So there are a ton of barriers. I think I could probably spend the whole hour talking about the barriers that I faced. But I do want to say, and I think this is really, really important, that there are barriers and there are obstacles, but there are also lighthouses out there, or people that do give you opportunity, or who do say a kind word, which sometimes is all that you need. And they may not be as many as the other things, but I think it's really, really important to look for them and to focus on them. And I've tried very hard, especially in the last couple of years, to look hard to find them and focus on them. Because if you focus on the negative and you always focus on the reasons why you can't do things, you'll never move forward. And so we have to train ourselves to look for those other things. There are positive things out there. So it's kind of training your brain that way.
I love that, Melissa. You said something that is close to my heart, because I teach on happiness, and we talk about one of the tools is always look for the good, and that helps train your brain. So tell us, as we are talking just about breaking barriers and your representation in media. So what are some changes that you have seen in representation of women in media over the past 20 years. You've been there for 20 years. I was like, wow, you must have started when you were 2. and then just when you think of, just walk us a little bit to see some of the changes you've seen, and what you think still needs to change.
Sure. I think I've been lucky that I have lived through a period of some really good change in the sense that it was hard won, by all means. But as a result of the Me Too movement, as a result of those protests after the murder of George Floyd, and that you remember, there was this push to get more DEI, diverse candidates in businesses and on screens. And I think that, that contributed to helping COVID, whilst it was a really awful time, in a sense, it did for a while there, which is sad that I do feel we've kind of lost it, but it did bring the world together and we were all combined. We all felt like we were one, we were all working to common goals. So I think as a result of those 3 things, there were barriers that were broken down, different types of barriers. So representation on screen, you now see as a result of more women campaigning and fighting and breaking ceilings, older women on screens, much more representation. And then equally, we changed the way we did things with COVID. So, we could do things from home. So that allowed greater access to people. But I do worry, having said that whilst I've lived through a time of great expansion, we are slowly seeing some of that unravel as a result of, at the moment we're seeing various DEI policies being reversed. And so I do think it's slightly dangerous where the world is going. But again, it is an opportunity where strides have been made to keep them going. And just one last thing in terms of where I think much more needs to be done is, as women, and I say this often, and it's not just in my industry, in all industries, there has been a lot more mentoring. So women can get mentored, but they cannot get sponsored. And that's why you see a lot of women rising to a certain rank, but then they can't go any further. Then there's still these barriers that they face, sometimes invisible, sometimes very visible. But what women need is they need sponsorship to get them into those next levels, not just mentoring.
I love what you've just said right now, but I want you to unpack it a little bit more. Like, tell us a little bit more, because sometimes people get it all twisted. Like, we think we have, just because we have a mentor, we have a sponsor. Can you help us understand the difference of these 2 distinctions of a mentor and a sponsor, in how we should pursue?
Sure. So I think with mentoring, you will find a lot of organizations that are open to mentoring, or a lot of people that are happy to kind of mentor you in the sense of that give you some advice and tell you how they did it. And people are very willing to share their stories, or even now, people who are listening to me, they may hear something that hopefully will be helpful to them for wherever they are. But that's not the same as getting access to opportunity. So you can hear all the best advice in the world, but if you don't get that door open for you, or you don't get put in a position where you can actually have that change or get to that next level, then it's not as helpful. And that's where I think, when you look at men and women, I think men have a lot more sponsors who are pushing them into those next levels, whereas women have a lot more mentors, not sponsors, but that's because there are fewer positions available for women to begin with.
Okay. Is it possible for women, is it, who's the onus is on who? Is it on me to look for a sponsor, or is it for the people in those positions to look to sponsor people?
I think it's a mixture of both. It's a mixture of just how people operate. I think with more awareness of knowing that this is something where more improvement is needed, it's on us and it's on other people to look for that. So, for example, I lead a team at the moment at CBS News Confirmed. And instead of just I've made it a point for me to look for opportunity for my team, to try and open doors for them, or to nudge them into spaces where they can try and do things, as opposed to just telling them what would be nice for them to do. Right. You actually need to take action. So it's a wider conversation about people being in leadership positions, taking action for people coming up the ranks, as opposed to just words.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to tie this again with Remarkable. One of the work we do is helping people to be able to self-promote, to be able to speak up, and be able to look for these opportunities. So it's so important that you're saying that the onus is on both of us, even me who who wants a sponsor, I should be able to speak up and ask someone, can you be my sponsor? Would that be weird or awkward if I came and asked? If somebody came and asked that?
I think it's just where we're moving to in the industry. I mean, first of all, you need mentors before you can have sponsors, and you can be your own sponsor and be your own advocate. It's just that when there aren't as many positions available, it's kind of a tighter race, but we need to look for ways that we can make opportunities for other people and for each other. And you volunteering for things, I was always told, like, you've just got to raise your hand and you've got to be in the room and you've got to be willing to do all these things. And I was like, I'm doing all of those things, but still no doors are getting open for me. And so you can beat them down, but you also have to, you need people on the other side who are willing to loosen that door for you a little bit so that it can eventually fall open.
Yeah, I'm going to bring us back to when you talked about the DI and how it's changed. I think that since 2020, and right now in 2025, there's definitely a misunderstanding about DEI. So can you share your thoughts on what it truly means? Because I've seen some work of
Sure. I think, so often we hear these things, and in society, they kind of take on a different meaning to what the facts actually say. And I've done a lot of reporting on this, and I think that there's a misunderstanding that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, means hiring based on race. And it means that and there's a misunderstanding that underqualified people of a certain ethnicity are getting hired. That's not what DEI is at all. In fact, the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, which is law in the United States, means that you cannot discriminate based on race, and that everybody who is hired needs to be qualified for that job. What DEI means and what it has been is greater access and inclusion for people who wouldn't get those opportunities otherwise. And it isn't really only about race. It means greater access to learning for people from underrepresented minorities, older people having more accessibility in the workplace, like larger font sizes so that they would be able to read better, or for women who've just had babies to be able to have rooms where they can go and, pump breast milk. So it's like making our societies more inclusive for all people to be able to work and have access to opportunity and have access to learning. So, you'll often see that there might be great representation at a certain level, but they're not at the C-suite. And so this DEI programs were often trying to fill in those gaps for those people that didn't have that access to opportunity or that mentoring or, sometimes that's sponsoring.
Yeah.
And so that's really what DEI is. It is not trying to hire underqualified people into positions that they don't belong in. That's never what it meant, what it was meant for, but that's how it's sometimes being interpreted.
That's how it's been. And to follow up on what you've said, there's a little video online about what you've done on DEI work. So can we have it on?
So this is really interesting. So when you look at the data, especially in terms of like how things change. So in 2020, when there was that big push, according to research by the University of North Carolina and Texas A&M, there were 253 Black executives in 2020 in S&P 500 companies. By 2023, there were 417. So that's a big jump, but still that's under 500 people. Now compare that to white executives. Those numbers didn't shrink. It's not like they went down. They still went up. In 2020, there was 6,286. In 2023, 6,469. So just take a look, Lindsay, when we're talking about 417 compared to 6,469 white people, here you can see this huge disparity, and this is exactly why we need these programs.
And why everybody should be following CBS Confirmed on Instagram, because you guys put a lot of these infographics up there for people to see as well. Melissa Mahtani, thank you.
Yes, please do go and follow CBS News Confirmed. We are, constantly trying to break down the data for people, because there is this misconception that DEI is detrimental to white people and to white men specifically. If you go back and look at the beginning of that clip, you'll see that I break down some of that data too. But it's a misnomer. It may be how people feel, but it's not real. And if you actually look at the data, and you could see that discrepancy there, the number of Black executives in those positions is minuscule in comparison. And so the DEI initiatives are trying to widen access for people from underrepresented minorities so that we can have a more level playing field that, better represents the kind of societies that we live in.
Wow, thank you so much. I will definitely be following that. I was very fascinated by the data. Fascinates me all the time. And I'm like, you follow the data follow the data, follow the numbers, and it will tell you the story. So thank
Right.
you. So tell us, let's move on to like, what impact do you think visibility and representation in media have on shaping the confidence in the marginalized communities?
I mean, I think it's huge, absolutely huge. In fact, it cannot be understated. When you see somebody who looks like you in a position that you aspire to, you believe that it's possible for you.
Yeah.
We started off speaking about obstacles and like, what obstacles have you faced as a woman? Well, if you never see it as somebody like doing something that you want to do, you just don't even know if it's possible. So, it kind of paves a way, and not only for you to reach that position, but if you see somebody in a kind of position that you aspire to, that seeing them makes you feel like you could do that and more. Like, you could do that position, and then you could break further barriers. And so it really cannot be understated. And it's also, it doesn't mean that it's easy, but therefore they are kind of like paving a pathway for you, opening a door, giving you sort of a guide map of how to get into those positions and then go even further. And so I think representation is absolutely huge. It's absolutely needed. And not just for careers. I mean, even for families, the cookie cutter perfect family where everybody gets on and there's like a support network, it just doesn't really exist as in the way that we would like it to. And so even seeing those people in those positions, they become role models for you for much more than your career, just for how those people are handling themselves. And I think it's really, really important.
I love that. I love the work you did on the CNN Heroes. I watched CNN Heroes, and I just love watching, seeing some of the people who have been named heroes who come from really basic backgrounds and just the things they've had to overcome. And I think for me that helps in showing representation as well, because that's some of the things we work on at IAmRemarkable when we are helping people be able to speak for themselves. We tell them, look at some of the people who've been online on TED Talks, and and try and see whether you can mimic them, and then until you find your own voice. So
Absolutely.
seeing people who look like you or you admire who look like you has been a game changer for me, as definitely.
And I love CNN Heroes. I've been so privileged to speak to so many people and report on such an uplifting and inspiring event. And I love the work that team do. So big shout out to them. But, I do think it's really important, because so often we focus on like the shiny, things that are presented to us, or celebrities, and there's room for all of that. But so often it's the everyday heroes that are really, really making a difference. And sometimes, we live in a really complex world. There is a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of suffering. People have their own issues. And sometimes you can really feel quite hopeless. But it's only until you see somebody else who's making a difference and is almost giving you, again, like a guidebook or a pathway, or switching on a light for you in whatever they're facing in their own life. And this is so much of what CNN Heroes does, that it can really inspire you and give you some hope for a path that you can take. And I think it's really, really important that we do that for each other.
Thank you. I love that. Yes. So tell us, what stories are missing from the mainstream media right now, and how can we create spaces for those narratives? What other stories are missing?
So for me, what I would say is, I think, I'm British, and I lived most of my life in London, although I grew up in Zambia, and then I moved to the United States. So I've always found the American media quite different to international media. And so I do think that, when we talk about stories that are missing, I think it's more just a common humanity that is missing in the stories that we do. So often, and it's not just media, it's society is trying to put people in boxes. But actually what social media has done over the past couple of years is it's broken down all of those barriers. So when we're talking about issues, they affect people all over the world in very similar ways. So for example, climate change, how people here are dealing with some of that is very similar to how people in Africa are, or in India. And I do think we need to do a better job of connecting those dots for people, because people are people, regardless of where they are. How people fall in love, how people will mourn for a loved one, whether that be in Ukraine or in Gaza or in Sudan. Like, those feelings are the same. And I do think that there's so much more that unites us than divides us. And that is really missing from media. And we could do a better job of connecting those dots.
I love that. Thank you. So we're going to switch gears now and talk a little bit more about leadership. And you have been a host. So for me, this is so fun. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's the one who's usually hosting. She's the one who's a moderator. She's a journalist.
I much prefer it.
But now you're on the other side. So,
I know.
So as a host and a moderator, you've had conversations with powerful figures, powerful leaders. So from your experience, what makes a great leader in today's world?
For me personally, I would say it's authenticity. So many people are saying things and just trying to tick boxes or to, stick to a script to look one way for certain viewers or constituents or whatever it may be. But real leaders are people that are very authentic and who inspire you and have integrity. And I think that is getting rarer. And so often when, it's really watching what people do, not necessarily what they say. And those are the people that I've really learned the most from and who have just had an energy to them that has really affected me or have said things to me that just really stayed with me.
I love that. I want us to talk a little bit more about leaders, because it seems like the narrative for who the leader is changing. From before it was a very authoritarian kind of leader, and that's what people felt like they needed then. And I think it's just from when you think of leadership from the industrial age, but now we're in the digital age, we are all over the world. So you could be leading people, but they're all over the world. So how does you talked about being authentic, how does that look like? Tell us a little bit more on what that looks like when you're leading people who a diverse range of people who have different values, different sociopolitical values and cultural values and different, but you're leading them. How does that look like? What would a good leader look like?
So this is just my opinion. It doesn't mean that I'm right, but for me personally, I would say it comes back to that shared humanity and people being people, regardless of the different things that we believe, or the barriers that society would like to put up in front of us. I think that real leadership is not loud. So often weakness feels like it has to be the loudest person in the room because of whatever insecurity that you might see. Yeah. For me, leadership that is strong is somebody who is inspiring each person to be their best version of themselves, to feel safe, to inspire that there's a way that we could be better, to be solution oriented, to bring people together and again look for solutions and opportunities, and for it to feel real. That means when there are difficult conversations to be had, we have them. We don't shy away from them, and it means listening. That to me is authentic leadership.
That is good.
Where you come from a place of quiet strength.
Quiet strength. Thank you. I like that. I love everything you're saying, Melissa. So let's talk about if you could give one piece of advice to young women who want to step into leadership, what would it be? Especially when we are thinking about this year's International Women's Day theme, the theme is accelerate action. Okay, so I don't want to ask too many questions in the same question, but how would you interpret that theme, and how can young women use it to drive their leadership journey forward?
So the piece of advice that I would give to young women is to not take no for an answer. Now, that doesn't mean being stubborn and digging your heels in. It means that you will always hear no. And an example of this is when you look at my work and the show reel that we played, it's like, oh yeah, look at all these things she's done. For each one that you see, I probably had like 10 to 50 no's beforehand, right? Wow. So it doesn't come easy. And it's so easy for us to look at other people and think, oh yeah, but she, but. So when people tell you no, say, okay, thank you. And then look for another way to do the same thing that you want, but just different. Yeah. So it's like not taking that no and being defeated, but just being solution oriented, and looking for opportunities for yourself and not taking no for an answer, whether that no might be coming from you and you're like telling yourself that you can't do it, or other people are telling you that you can't do it. You've just got to ignore the noise and focus on what you can do and try anyway. Yeah. I'm diverting here for a second from your question, but one great piece of advice that I got recently was I was interviewing Caroline Wanger. She is, I'm sure you guys
She's
might
from
know.
Kenya.
Yeah. And it was so interesting to me. And again, like, when we talk about leadership, she was so authentic. And, I've interviewed, I've been lucky enough to interview like presidents or, heads of other countries. But speaking to her, she was so inspiring because she said to me, I've given myself the opportunity to fail at least 5 times a day. So now when I fail, it doesn't feel like a big deal because I'm like, okay, well, that's number 1, that's number 2. And I've given myself at least 5. So you kind of take the sting out of it. And so therefore you just keep trying. If you're so scared of failure, then you don't even try. Whereas you've just got to try and try and try again. And if you get told no, you say, okay, thanks, I'm going to try a different way. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. And that's what I've done. And so like I said, don't focus on what you see because you think it's one way, which is you projecting, when actually I can genuinely, honestly say for everything that you've seen, the way you think I've succeeded, let me show you the no's that came before or around that.
Yeah.
I'm a living testament of that. And I can't remember the second question that you asked me. It was how can we accelerate faster?
Yes.
Well, that is in the same vein. It is to do it for yourself and to uplift other women at the same time. And this is something that I've really learned, like a hard lesson along the way. And it might not be a popular one for me to say, but I think it's really important. Mm-hmm. Women can sometimes be other women's biggest roadblocks. And it is our duty to lift each other up. I have had female bosses who have seen me as competition and have not given me the way. I've had some female bosses who have been brilliant, but it's not a zero-sum game. And so often we operate like it is. Like if she succeeds, that means I can't, right? And that's how we approach things, where that is not true. There is enough in the world for everybody. And if we want to accelerate, we should be lifting each other up and accelerating faster together, because together we really, really are stronger. And it, you might not feel like that, but that is truly what I believe.
I truly believe that too. I truly believe that when we do things together, we do them, we are stronger anyways. And I had asked the question what was your advice to younger women? And I just thought what you said was advice for me, and I'm not a younger woman. It is like, don't say no, just keep trying and keep pushing.
I will just say that, so one other person that I interviewed actually at CNN Heroes, she was 11 years old and she, again, stuck with me. So these some of the little, and again, it's also on my Instagram. You can check it out. It's at Melissa Mahtani, but she was an 11-year-old. She was one of our young wonders. And she said to me, there will always be that voice in the back of your head that tells you, no, you can't do it. But you know what? Mm-hmm. You go out and tell that voice that you're going to do it anyway. And I was standing there on the red carpet looking and interviewing this 11-year-old going, oh my goodness, wow, that is advice for me. That is advice that I need. And here is this 11-year-old, Brooklyn Kimberly, amazing. And I was like, I need to have some of her firepower, and I need to pass that on to other women, because again, together we are a sisterhood. We need to strengthen each other and be each other's guiding lights, not each other's competition.
Indeed. I love that. Tell us one person, who is a woman who has inspired you?
So many, for different reasons. So obviously I've just mentioned too, like Caroline Wanger, also Brooklyn Kimberly, different ends of the spectrum. Also, Christiane Amanpour, one of the best journalists. I've been lucky enough to cross paths with her and work with her at CNN. And I really believe her motto of being truthful, not neutral. I've worked with great, amazing people, Albert Damon, Clarissa Ward. There is so many. But it's also not just the people that you see on screen or the famous people. There are so many women in my life who have inspired me by lifting me up, by making me believe in myself when I didn't feel like I could. And they're some of my bestest friends. And so many women. But I will again say that so often the women who've inspired me or who I've looked up to have been women who have practiced what they preached. So it wasn't what they said, but it was how they lived their lives. And that's what means so much more.
Thank you. Now we'll switch to talk about IAmRemarkable. So I'm Remarkable is all about celebrating our achievements. So that's what we do all the time here at I'm Remarkable. We help people learn how to celebrate their achievements. We talk about your achievement is not talking about your achievement is not bragging, talking about yourself. So as a journalist, you amplify other people's stories. You've already told us a few stories already, which I'm already intrigued. But tell me, how do you navigate telling your story? And or how has self-promotion played a role in your career? How have you done that?
So telling my story feels very uncomfortable. I much prefer being in the question asking position. That is for sure. It honestly, I do feel like this is a waste of time, because why should people ask about me? Like, I should be asking about people, and there's so many more interesting people, which comes back to, you know, why the work that I Am Remarkable does is so important, because we should feel really proud, and I shouldn't, you know, feel embarrassed of things that I've done. I should actually be owning it. And clearly I have some work to do, but I'm also being very honest about it, because, you know, that's how we learn. And so I'm very grateful for this opportunity. But I think in terms of self-promotion, funnily enough, I started to self-promote a lot when I moved into digital media and social media. And the reason why was I was so frustrated at work, and I found that my bosses or my colleagues were following me on social. So I would send them emails at work or ask for things in work, but I wouldn't get them. But then if I posted something on Instagram or on Facebook at the time, they would see it and be like, wow, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Do you want to do this? And it became like an access to opportunity for me. So it was, again, when people say no, as I said, say, okay, let me try a different way. So if I post it here, then it was kind of by suggestion, it would come full circle. And from then I realized that social media really was actually my best friend in making people aware of the work that I had done and connecting with other people. And so I do think that it's very important to be using those channels and to also show what you can do, what you would like to do, and also seeing it as a mode to really connect with people and to ask for help or to collaborate.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because when you're saying you went to social media when you're still at work, there's a question, like some of the work that I am involved in, where people are afraid to go to social media when they're employed, because and one of the ways I quote people, I'm like, your brand is your brand. Your brand is not your employer's brand. I mean, you have the employer's brand, but people need to be able to brand themselves and be able to promote themselves and be who they are without them being branded as this other person.
And you know, yeah. And sorry to interrupt you, but you just brought up such a good point that I wanted to pick up on, which is self-branding is so important. And I find that for me personally, the past 5 years, but really the past 3 years have been a real personal journey for me. Just with my personal life, my professional life, big changes in both. And also I think that people have always struggled to put me in a box, you know, and I was always trying to fit into those boxes, whether it be at work or in other spaces. And eventually, and it's kind of been a little bit of a self journey of you know, self-reflection and sort of evolving, I realized that I had to take the narrative back, and I had to be able to show people that actually I'm not just one thing, I'm a lot of different things, and these are the things that I can do. And I used my website and social media to kind of almost rebrand myself to the world, because I didn't feel that it was being done adequately, or people were trying so hard to be like, where does she fit? And so I decided that, you know, like, I needed to be authentic to who I was. There's a very good quote that I've seen recently, which I think is really true. It's like, we spend the first half of our life trying to learn how to be everything for everyone, and then come to this point and we're trying to unlearn everything we've been told, so we can actually come back to who we really, really are at our core.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, this is the work that we're doing, helping people learn how to brand themselves so that they can know themselves, because you are your best person to tell your story. You're your best person to tell your narrative, and that's what we talk about in I Am Remarkable. Don't let other people determine your narrative. You create your narrative. And we have, in our digital age now, we have the platform. We don't have to go to CNN or wherever. You can just create your own narrative by, you know, owning your own social media. So thank you for saying that. So now we are going to ask you one final question. What makes you remarkable? And remember, in I Am Remarkable, we always begin our answer with, I am remarkable because.
I am remarkable because I keep showing up even when it's hard. And it's not always easy to do. And I think that makes me remarkable.
Thank you. Thank you. So now we'll switch to the audience. We're going to have a Q&A session, and we are going to look at what the questions that the audience has written have asked you, Melissa. So I think the first question is, can you see it?
Yeah. Do I have any strategies for dealing with imposter syndrome and self-doubt?
Yes.
So yes, and it's one that I have to say to myself all the time. It's just like you hear it and you say, hello, thank you, not today. And it sounds much easier said than done, but it really is just what you can do. I wish I could give you some other like really, fancy thing to do, but that's as simple as it is. You recognize it and you try anyway. Because you deserve a try, you deserve a shot, and maybe it won't work out. And if it doesn't, that's okay, but you give it your best shot because you're capable of either doing whatever you put your mind to or figuring out how to do it. Now, I don't want to just say that and make it seem easy because I deal with it every day, and it doesn't feel good, but that is what you have to do. It doesn't matter what it feels like. You say to yourself, nope, not today. I'm going to try anyway.
We're going to try anyway. The second question we have is, let me see where. Ooh, I need to get my glasses.
I've got it. Where do you think that mindset about women holding other women back comes from?
Yes.
I think partly it can depend on upbringing. It can come from insecurity because, you have to be secure to believe that there's a big enough pie for everyone. Otherwise, it's like jealousy too. And, I think that it was really hard, like that each of our positions, wherever we've gotten to, it was really hard for women to succeed. So people were hanging on to their positions out of dear life or like trying to keep themselves in their lane as opposed to sharing and being like, no, there is enough room for us. And that's where I would say that it potentially stems from. And I think that, culturally, it's time for us to not just break it by telling people this is how you should be, but by like making other women feel secure, by society changing things so that we all do feel like there's enough for us. And also by each of us believing in ourselves to know that, okay, if I see somebody else succeeding, that means that I can do it too, not that it means like, oh my God, she's done it, so it means I'll never succeed.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I do it too. It's not like I'm sitting here like, going, oh, yeah. No, I mean, I still feel sometimes like when I see other people, I'm like, why couldn't that happen for me? It's a really real way to react. But you need to sort of change it and be like, no, that's not what it means. It means that if she can do it, then she's paved the way for me and I can do it too. And maybe I'll reach out and ask for some advice, or maybe I'll, and see how I could get there.
Yeah. So I think the next question is, how did you navigate the negative experiences you had with female leaders, and what was your strategy?
It's easy to say these things like in hindsight when I'm reflecting. I think at the time I probably drank a lot of wine and cried. I was like, what's going on? I'm very human. We all are. But I think at first I was really taken aback because I couldn't understand it. I was like, why? And you go through these sort of circles. So I remember specifically with one person where I was like, why is that happening to me? Why is she doing that? Why is she seeing me as a threat? And then, how can I change this? And then it's kind of like you go into this sort of space where you're being gaslit, and then you start to make yourself small so that you don't offend anybody. And I did that for years in different scenarios. And then, so it took me a while before I learned the hard way. I didn't have a strategy, and I kind of got really knocked down, and I had to pick myself up again. And in that sort of learning curve, I've now realized that says more about that person than it does about me. Whereas before I kind of reacted and took it internally and thought it was me. Whereas now at this stage, I would be like, okay, well, maybe that's not the kind of person that I want to work for. And I needed to kind of come back and learn my worth and be like, actually, no. But at the time I didn't. I just sort of spiraled and and diminished my self-worth and diminished myself to a certain degree. But that's what I mean about sort of transformation. And now, when that was happening at a certain time, that's all I could see. And I realized that I blocked out all the other women and all the other positive experience who were there, that were shining that light. And that's what I was saying at the beginning of this. Like, we so often focus on the negative, but there are those other people out there that you need to lean on and lean into, so that when somebody is giving you a negative experience, you're like, okay, all right, and that's that. But you don't define me.
Yeah, it doesn't mean, it doesn't say anything about you. It says it's something about them.
And you honor it, and you see what you can learn from it.
Yeah. Oh, we have another question.
Yeah, that's me and you. You know, next time it happens, we'll be like, okay.
Oh, that's Tonya. Yeah. So is there, Jenny says, is there a lesson you learned the hard way in your career that you wish was something people talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think struggling with that is one. I think rejection is another one. You know, rejection again can really diminish your self-worth, because I think, me at least, you know, I so often internalized and thought, like, why? I'm not good enough. What is it about me?
Yeah.
As opposed to understanding that sometimes the marketplace was just really tough, or sometimes it was like, they already had you know, so often I remember I went through a period where I got so many interviews, and, you know, interviewing for jobs is really hard. And, you know,
It's a job by itself.
yeah, you know, they put you through so many different hurdles, and you have to meet so many people, and you're constantly on the spot, and you're taking tests, and you're doing all sorts of things. And I would always get to like the highest level, but then just never make it. And I was like, what's happening? And then for a while there, I felt like, I'm not saying this is what was happening, I'm saying how it felt for me, is that I was like that token DI candidate, or that token external candidate that they will bring in with no intention of ever actually hiring me, because the job was always going to somebody else. But it can be really soul destroying. It can be really draining, and you really internalize it. And I think, you know, well, I'll say two things. Firstly, that it really affected my self-worth, and it really affected the way that I was showing up in the world, because I just felt so defeated. And also the news was just so bad anyway for a time, that it was really hard to rise above it, or to not feel knocked down in so many different levels. And, you know, don't forget, on top of that, we're like women who have like friendships and family lives and relationships and all the rest of it that comes with it. It was, you know, complex in itself. But the older you get, or by being so knocked down and then learning to rise again, you come back stronger. And it really is just, you know, you don't have any other choice. And I've been lucky enough to have incredible friends and incredible women in my lives, and to learn from, and to help me get back up again when things haven't been great. The second thing I wanted to say is, you know, I always have this kind of sort of second guessing of myself when I'm asked these questions of like, oh, look, you know, I am a professional working in an organization, and really, should I be using this to sort of, you know, be applying for my next job and using this as an opportunity to promote myself and say something very clever that sounds good? Or should I give you the really raw version of me that doesn't sound so great and makes me probably sound a little bit like, oh yeah, you know, I cried, I was drinking. But I do think when I came back to me saying that we are all people, we all react the same, and we have a shared humanity, I've always decided to be authentic and to be real. And so you're getting the very real, raw version. But I think that's actually the most helpful.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you may look at all the shiny things that I've done and be like, oh yeah, well, and now you're learning that actually behind the scenes, I'm just the same as you. We're all the same.
You know, I love what you said, because that has been my realization. There's something we say in my language, Ubuntu, from Kenya. So we have Omodo in my language, which is Ubuntu, and it really means our humanity. And that you keep talking about our shared humanity, and even when you say that, it gives me goosebumps, because if we only knew that we are who you are. We are one. We're just one person. There's only one breath going on. We are connected by our humanity, and if we focus on that, I think it would change our perspective on how we see people, how we see problems, how we see just how we deal, how we make decisions.
Absolutely. You know, people all over the world, there is so much suffering. There is so much war going on. The way a person bleeds in any country where there's any conflict is the same. The way like a little kid is hungry, who's malnutrition, it's the same. You know, there is so much more. We spend so much time arguing about things that actually are quite insignificant when we should spend that time trying to help and uplift others.
I have one last question from Elena, who says, do you have a family? If so, what advice do you have for someone who is considering having a family but has no female leadership to look up to with a family? Ooh.
Be the leader.
Be the leader.
You have it all inside of yourself. You know, looking out to other people is just, it feels good. It's reassurance. Everything you need is inside yourself. So just be silent, be still, and listen to yourself, and you'll know exactly what to do.
Okay. All right. So we will switch on to Melissa. Do you have, before we just move on to the last segment because of time, do you have anything to add?
I just want to say a big thank you to the IAmRemarkable community. As I said, you know, at the beginning in the version of like being really raw and being myself, it does feel weird to be like, I am remarkable, which is why I appreciate the work that this organization is doing so much. And I just want to say a big thank you to you, Zippy, and also to the wonderful women behind the screen that you don't see who are facilitating this. So a big thank you to Noah, a big thank you to Eleanor, and a big thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa, for an insightful and inspirational discussion. If you'd like to see more of Melissa at work, make sure you check out her website. It was down there, melisamahtani.com. And also follow CBS News Confirmed on social channels for the work that she's currently spearheading. She is remarkable. You can see some of the comments going on there, Melissa. And so just before we close the session, I'd like to invite any of our audience who are new to IAmRemarkable or who would like a refresher on training to sign up for the workshop this month. We have IAmRemarkable for the rest of the month. We have gold and platinum facilitators who are hosting sessions on behalf of IAmRemarkable. It's completely free. Sign up using the QR code right there on the screen to find out anything more about IAmRemarkable. Please head to that website. Okay, you can see the website over there. You can see the link and the QR code. So with that being said, another huge thank you to Melissa Mahtani for joining us today, and to you, our audience. I've been your host, Dr. Zippy Abla, and I want you to stay remarkable.